The camera cuts to Stephen Colbert's studio, lights dimmed, air thick. There's no monologue, no jazz band stinger. Just a slow, deliberate zoom onto Colbert's face, lips tight, eyes gleaming. You could cut the tension with a knife. He turns to the audience, the red-on-air light humming like a war drum. "Tonight," he says, his voice smooth but heavy, "we welcome a duchess. A beat, but not just any duchess." The audience chuckles nervously. The camera shifts, the doors part. Meghan Markle steps into the light. She wears tailored navy, flawless makeup, that signature practiced smile barely stretching across her face. Her heels click against the polished studio floor with each confident step. A smattering of applause follows her as she waves briefly, then sits opposite Colbert. She looks calm, poised, but her fingers twitch beneath the desk. Colbert leans in with a crooked smile. "Meghan, welcome." Or should I say Her Royal Highness? Oh wait, I forget which titles are in use this week. The audience half laughs, half freezes. Meghan's smile falters. 1 second, maybe less. Then she recovers, giving him the kind of cool, diplomatic look that belongs in a palace. "Thank you for having me, Stephen," she says. Truly, cut to. Audience nervous energy. Phones out. This isn't a celebrity interview anymore. It's an ambush. And right here, before it detonates further, if you're still breathing and glued to this train wreck in slow motion, do us a favor, smash that like button. Share this insanity and subscribe, because what you're about to witness is the televised implosion no one saw coming, except maybe Meghan herself. Back to the interview. Colbert picks up his index cards, but doesn't look down. He stares straight at her. "Let's get into it." She blinks from Hollywood to Windsor to Montecito. "Your exits have made more headlines than most wars. Care to explain why every chapter in your life seems to end in a firestorm?" Silence. Even the band doesn't breathe. Meghan tilts her head. "I think that's an overly dramatic framing," she replies, measured. "Life evolves. Circumstances change. We grow." Colbert folds his arms, elbows on the desk. "Sure, growth. That's what they call it now. You left the palace citing racism, toxic culture, and neglect. And now you're here, selling a new line of jam. Sounds like quite the growth curve." A low murmur ripples through the audience. Meghan stiffens. "That is an unfair characterization," she says, her voice still even but tighter. "And we didn't leave for jam. We left for peace." Colbert laughs, but there's no joy in it. "You had global press coverage, a Netflix docuseries, multiple interviews, and somehow you still keep telling people they don't understand your pain. At what point do you stop branding trauma?" A gasp, a sharp inhale from the third row. Meghan doesn't blink. Her lips part, but nothing comes. Colbert presses harder. "You spoke of suicidal thoughts. You told Oprah the palace denied you help. That's heavy, tragic. But let me ask you this. Were there really no other options? Private care, mental health professionals outside the system? Or was the story too valuable to explore quietly?" The studio goes cold. Meghan swallows. Her voice is thin now. "Stephen, that was the darkest time of my life, and yet it became primetime content," he replies. "Did it help?" Her hands shake slightly. Her gaze wavers, then locks in. "You have no idea what it was like," she says. "None." Colbert narrows his eyes. "I don't, but I do know that when people cry out for privacy while building personal brands around being mistreated by royalty, it's hard not to question motives." More murmurs. Camera zooms in. Meghan's armor fractures just slightly. "It wasn't about fame. It was about freedom," she says. Colbert jabs back. "Freedom with Spotify, Netflix, book deals, and a 14-acre mansion must be nice. And yet, still the victim." Her mouth opens, shuts, opens again. "We gave up everything. You monetized everything," he snaps. Boom. Silence. One of the producers is off stage. Pacing now, the camera pans the crowd. Phones recording, mouths agape. This isn't an interview. It's an inquisition. Meghan leans forward. "Do you know what it feels like to wake up to a death threat against your child?" she asks, her voice cracking. Colbert freezes. She presses forward. "That fear, that reality. That's why we left. Not for the press, not for the cameras, for survival." A pause. The studio shifts, but Colbert doesn't yield. "Then why stay in the spotlight?" he asks, softly now. If it's survival you want, why re-enter the fire every chance you get? Silence. Long. Suffocating. Meghan exhales slowly. Her lips tremble. Her eyes search the floor. Then the cameras, then the audience. She doesn't answer. Colbert flips to the next card. Pauses. Then he looks up. Let's talk about Archie. Meghan sits upright like she's been shocked. Colbert watches her flinch and goes in for the kill. Cut to black. Part 2. Let's talk about Archie. The studio froze. Meghan's spine went rigid. It was no longer discomfort, it was something more primal. The kind of stillness that precedes either fight or flight. And for the first time that night, she looked afraid. Colbert leaned back casually, his voice deceptively light. You said in the Oprah interview that there were conversations about your child's skin tone, about what title he might or might not receive. Those are serious allegations. I never said who, Meghan interrupted quickly, her tone sharp, too sharp. And that's the problem, isn't it? Colbert pressed. You implied that the institution, the entire royal family, was harboring racism, but never identified the individual. You dropped a bomb and left the entire monarchy in the blast radius. Meghan's lips parted. A tremor passed through her hands, because naming names would have destroyed someone's reputation. He cut in. Interesting. But you were okay leaving everyone else under a cloud. You were okay letting speculation run wild. Isn't that just another form of character assassination, Duchess? Murmurs from the audience. Audible shifts in the seats. The temperature dropped another degree. I was protecting yourself. Colbert's voice edged higher. Or your narrative. Meghan swallowed, then squared her shoulders. I was protecting my son. Colbert's eyes glinted. And yet, you've let your story about him become a global controversy. With no resolution, no truth, just ... insinuation. The audience was hanging on every word. Security shifted near the edge of the stage. The band remained frozen, and Meghan, her armor was cracking. You have no idea what it's like, she snapped, her voice raw. To be in that family, to know your child is seen as lesser. To see headlines comparing a newborn to a chimpanzee. That's not a story, that's trauma. Colbert didn't blink. And yet, here you are again, talking about it again. It again? That word, monetizing it, hit like a slap. Her mouth opened in disbelief. That's disgusting. What's disgusting, he countered, is weaponizing trauma as content. When you're on the cover of Time magazine calling for privacy, and then signing multi-million-dollar deals to rehash the same grievances, people start asking questions. Gasps, some applause, a few boos. The crowd was fracturing, just like the facade. Meghan leaned forward, hands clenched. Do you think I wanted this? Any of this? Do you think I wanted my son to be a symbol in a cultural war? I think, Colbert said coldly, you wanted to be a queen without the crown. The line sent a wave through the studio, and Meghan She flinched like it physically hurt. That's cruel, she whispered. But is it false? He asked. There was a long, unbearable pause. Then the unexpected happened. Whoopi Goldberg, sitting in the audience that night as a guest for the next segment, stood up. Stephen, that's enough. The entire room turned. This isn't journalism. Anymore, Whoopi said firmly. This is public flogging. The audience erupted gasps, murmurs, a few claps. Meghan blinked in disbelief. Colbert looked stunned, but only for a second. Whoopi, he said, his tone slipping. She agreed to be here. She knew no one agrees to be dissected like this. Whoopi snapped. You're better than this. The silence afterward was loud. Colbert looked at Meghan, at Whoopi, then back at his cards, but he didn't. Stop. I'm doing my job, he muttered. More to himself than to the room. Meghan stood. You've said enough, she said, her voice cold, but composed. I came here with grace. You brought a guillotine. Security moved. Producers panicked. A red light blinked on a control panel backstage, and then the biggest moment yet, Colbert stood up too. This isn't about you, Meghan, he said. Eyes burning. It's about truth. You brought your story to the world. I'm asking you to stand by it or walk away. She stared at him. Then she took a slow breath. I'll do one better, she said, and she removed her microphone. Meghan stood, microphone in hand, the wire dangling like a severed vein. The studio was breathless. Stephen Colbert remained frozen across the desk, watching her not with victory, but with something more complicated, something bordering on regret. But the cameras were still rolling. The red light never blinked. She didn't say another word, just set the microphone down on his desk like it was a gavel, and turned to leave. But the moment she turned, something unexpected happened. Voice, from the back row, cowered. Every head in the room whipped around. Audience members gasped. Producers scrambled, but Colbert didn't move. His eyes followed Meghan. Meghan stopped mid-step. She turned back around slowly, face pale. Squared, who said that? The studio was ice-dot silence. Then a man stood. Late 40s, suit too tight, press badge on his lanyard. Not a guest, not a producer, a reporter. "You run every time someone challenges your version of the truth," he said, voice steady. "Just like you did with the palace. And your family." And now this security moved fast, but Colbert raised a hand. "Not yet." Meghan stepped forward, her voice trembling not with fear, but fury. "I've endured more character assassination in 5 years than most people do in a lifetime. I walked through fire. I stood silent while your tabloids ripped me apart. And now I come here thinking maybe this platform would offer decency. And instead, I get ambushed." "You got questions?" the man said coldly. "I got interrogated," she snapped. The reporter smirked. "Because you act like a queen but refuse the crown." And then the moment cracked. Whoopi Goldberg stood again. "Okay," she said, voice raised. "We're done." Security closed in fast, removing the man as the audience erupted into claps, boos, shouts. It was pandemonium. But her voice like steel. "You let that happen." "I didn't ask him to speak," Colbert muttered. "You gave him the runway," she said. "This wasn't an interview. It was a firing squad." The room was spinning. Colbert exhaled, ran a hand through his hair. "Meghan, no," she said. "You don't get to play compassionate now. Not after everything." A pause, and then a surprise twist. Meghan sat back down. "I'm not going to run," she said. "Not this time. You want answers? Ask. But you better be ready for mine." Double quotes, gasps. Colbert blinked. "You're staying? You want truth?" she hissed. "Then get ready, because you're not the only one with receipts." A slow murmur spread. Across the audience, "You accuse me of monetizing pain," she said, voice rising. "What do you think this is? You turned my trauma into a ratings spike." Colbert opened his mouth. "Don't," she said. "Not until you're ready to talk about how many women you've mocked on this stage for sport. You want to talk accountability. Start with yourself." Silence. Pin, dash, drop. Then Colbert sat down, his jaw tensed. "I have made jokes," he said quietly. "Some I regret." She leaned in. "You weaponize humor because it gives you cover. You jab, then smirk, and call it satire. But the scars it leaves, they're real." The audience was still. No phones, no breathing, just tension. Colbert stared. At her, something shifting behind his eyes. "This isn't how I wanted it to go," he said finally. "But it's how it always goes," Meghan said. "For women who speak." And then the final reveal. She reached into her blazer, pulled out a folded letter. "This," she said, placing it on his desk, "is from a woman who tried to take her own life because of what your show said about her. Your monologue, a punchline. It went viral." She didn't. Colbert looked down at the paper like it might burn him. "Open it," she said. He did. The room was dead silent as he read. Halfway through, he stopped, looked up at her. "I didn't know." "You didn't ask," Meghan replied. For the first time all night, Colbert looked ashamed. The moment lingered. Then, the producer's voice cut in over the internal feed. 30 seconds, wrap it. But neither of them moved. Cut to commercial. The floor manager whispered. "No," Colbert said, "we keep rolling." And the show did. Right into a silence that said more than any question ever could. The silence in the studio didn't fade. It calcified. Meghan's footsteps had long vanished into the backstage corridors, but the emotional debris she left behind still hung in the air like fog-thick cold, and inescapable. Stephen Colbert stood completely still. Not the usual polished stillness of a late-night host awaiting applause, but the cold rigidity of a man who just witnessed someone crumble and wasn't sure if he was proud of it or haunted by it behind the camera. A producer motioned uncertainly. Should they cut to commercial? Was this salvageable? But no one moved. Not yet. The audience was locked in place, some slack-jawed, others nervously clutching their phones, capturing a few final seconds of the unraveling. Someone whispered, "Is she okay?" But the words disappeared into the hushed dot. And then, from the side of the stage, a voice, shaky, defiant. "You got what you wanted, didn't you?" It was Prince Harry walking out from backstage, hair tousled, eyes burning. He wasn't supposed to be on air. He wasn't even listed in the lineup. But somewhere in the chaos of his wife's emotional collapse, something inside him had snapped loose. The audience gasped as he stepped into the spotlight. Jaw-clenched Colbert, taken aback for the first time all night, blinked. "I didn't." "No, you were here," he said, tone suddenly more measured. "You knew enough," Harry shot back. "You knew enough to push her until she broke. That's your brand, isn't it? Peel the skin, find the blood, call it journalism." Harry Colbert said, slowly sitting down again, "Your wife agreed to this interview. Your team approved. The questions, if you didn't want the truth challenged, truth." Harry cut him off. "You don't care about truth. You care about ratings, about viral clips, about turning trauma into a punchline." The air shifted again another. Power shift, like tectonic plates, grinding. "Do you think this makes you brave?" Harry continued, voice rising. "You sat there like a vulture dressed in a suit, tearing apart every vulnerable thing she's ever shared. You didn't interview her, Stephen. You interrogated her. There was no applause, no laughter, just the hum of the studio lights and the weight of everything unsaid." "I defended my institution when it mattered," Harry pressed on. "But I left when I realized that same institution was willing to protect its image more than its people. We didn't run for fame. We ran for our lives, and straight into a Netflix deal," Colbert asked quietly, tone no longer mocking, almost. Sad. Harry didn't blink. "We didn't run into a Netflix deal," he said. "We ran into a chance to tell our side because nobody else ever asked for it." And then for the first time all night Colbert exhaled, said, "No one asked. We just assumed. We built castles out of headlines and filled in the windows ourselves." Harry nodded once, but it wasn't forgiveness. The damage was already done. Backstage, Meghan's quiet sobs echoed faintly through a studio microphone someone forgot to mute. That single, accidental sound, raw and unfiltered, was what finally broke the spell. Colbert glanced toward the control booth, cut the feed. A red light blinked out, but the silence stayed. Later that night, a storm brewed outside the CBS building, lightning flashing like paparazzi bulbs across Manhattan. Skyline. Inside a black SUV, parked quietly along the side entrance, Meghan sat curled in the corner, wrapped in a blanket. Harry was beside her, his hand on her back, steady and grounding. She wasn't crying anymore, just staring blankly through the tinted window at nothing in particular. "I knew he'd come after me," she whispered, "but I thought I could handle it." Harry didn't say anything at first. "Then you shouldn't have had to." A soft knock on the car window startled them both. It was Whoopi Goldberg. She wasn't part of the show. She wasn't even supposed to be nearby. But someone had called Heron, old friend, a quiet ally, someone who knew when the fire got too hot and people needed to feel seen. Meghan rolled down the window an inch. "Can I sit?" Whoopi asked. Meghan nodded slowly. She slid in. No words. At first, just the warmth of human presence that didn't demand anything. "They'll spin this," Whoopi finally said. "He'll spin it. So will every outlet, every late-night panel, every Twitter feed." But none of them were in that chair. Meghan looked down at her hands. "I don't even remember what I said," she whispered. "You said what was real. That's enough." And then a silence that felt sacred until Meghan broke it. "Was I wrong to come?" Whoopi looked her straight in the eyes. "No, you were just too honest for a world that profits from your pain." The next morning, the headlines were everywhere. Meghan melts down on live TV. Colbert vs. the Crown Prince Harry confronts late-night host. In shocking twist, clips flooded TikTok and YouTube. The hashtags trended for 72 hours straight. There were think pieces, parodies, reaction videos. Half the internet called Meghan brave. The other half called her manipulative. But somewhere beneath the noise, buried deep in the algorithmic avalanche, a single clip went viral in a different way. It was Meghan, unfiltered tears streaking down her face, voice shaking but clear. You don't understand what it's like to be silenced, then mocked when you finally speak. That line struck something true. Epilogue 6 months later, new podcast episode dropped. Not on Spotify, not on Netflix, just on a modest platform with no sponsors, no ads, no press blitz. It was titled The Chair. It featured no intro music, just Meghan, sitting alone. "I was warned not to speak again," she began. "They said I'd done enough damage, said I should disappear quietly and let the headlines fade. But I think we forget when women tell the truth, the world often mistakes it for drama." A pause, and maybe I was dramatic. Maybe I was emotional. But I was also honest, and that's something they can't take from me anymore. The episode ended with a moment of silence. Not for effect, just silence. The comments flooded in. "Thank you for being human." This wasn't a meltdown. This was survival. We saw the truth, we're still here. And in the final seconds, her voice returned calmer now. If this resonated with you, if you've ever felt unheard or humiliated for telling your story, please like, share, subscribe. Not because I need the numbers, but because I need you to know you're